Story 1. I cannot imagine this will get seen now. However, I am going to comment because I rarely do. I am in my mid-20s, studying to be a professional pilot, and I have smoked marijuana habitually several times a day for the last several years. While I remain a strong advocate for marijuana, I stopped smoking entirely about a month ago because I realized a few things. 1. I became complacent with my life and my surroundings, rarely wanting to change my routine because I knew when I was able to smoke. 2. I would spend extra cash on edibles, concentrates, and other cannabis products. Essentially, extra spending money meant it would be used to get me high. 3. I found myself making excuses to not see friends and family so I could remain comfortable at home with it. 4. It became a nightly ritual to the point where going to sleep without it seemed impossible. 5. Following the previous point, you stop dreaming because tetrahydrocannabinol hinders rapid eye movement sleep. I never really understood this until I quit and started having incredibly vivid, memorable dreams. Despite this, I still believe it is a beautiful plant with wonderful benefits. But if you are at the point where you think you cannot live without it, know that nothing is healthy in excessive amounts. If anyone needs help or advice on how to stop smoking, please feel free to message me. I am more than happy to help others. Story 2. I hesitate to send you to the subreddit Leaves, but it was a really important community for me to learn from. Be kind to the people there. Story 3. Both my roommates are heavy smokers, and they think very slowly. It takes them forever to understand anything. They often forget things. For example, they will step away from the dishes and never finish them without prompting. The house smells like a coffin. I eat the occasional cannabis edible, but seeing how lethargic they are has convinced me to quit using marijuana entirely. Story 4. You do not have an appetite unless you are high. You have to smoke heavily, though, to get to that point. Story 5. It can overcorrect anxiety and cause more anxiety. It can dull emotions in general, which may be helpful in some situations but harmful when empathy or awareness is needed. It reduces focus. You can work through it and regain focus if necessary, but it is an uphill battle, and if you lose focus you have to rebuild it. It lowers short-term memory, which leads to fewer long-term memories, especially of details. Can interfere with men's sex drive. Not all men are affected, but some are. Can cause stomach pain in some people. It is psychologically addictive and hijacks the dopamine system. Quitting smoking can reverse this, but heavy long-term smoking can make other pleasures less enjoyable. Story 6. After about 10 years of use, my body has developed an allergy that I have never heard anyone else get. When I use tetrahydrocannabinol, my sinuses become inflamed, nearly blocking the airway and forcing me to breathe through my mouth, which makes falling asleep very difficult. The next morning, the nasal mucus is relentless. It feels like everything is coming back out of my sinuses. This almost always leads to a minor nosebleed. I vape 95% of the time. I have reduced use to once a week or less. I have no other allergies. I drink more than 3 liters of water on days when I use tetrahydrocannabinol. I have noticed a pattern from reports I have heard. It may be related to the lymphatic system. Perhaps after many years it becomes clogged with terpenes or other compounds. I have heard from about 8 people with similar symptoms. I am following up with more questions to try to pinpoint a cause. Most of us have been long-term users, about 5 years vaping and smoking. A few people have said their lymph nodes become inflamed. My lymph nodes do not, but my lymphatic system still feels inflamed. Story 7. Demotivation in heavy consumers. It is fine in moderation, but multiple times per day seems to drain the ambition from most people I have seen, including myself long ago. Story 8. I have noticed that after an initial uptick in chatter, people tend to become quiet and zone out. When I used to smoke, I found it had a dulling effect on my personality and on my conversational skills afterward. Story 9. Most of this has already been said, but I want to reiterate 3 major observations from my own semi-frequent cannabis use. 1. Demotivation. The impact on motivation comes in 2 parts. First, when you initially use cannabis, many people fall into a habit of eating and watching television. Second, the next morning I experience a cannabis hangover. I feel groggy and more inclined to laze around. 2. Anxiety. Things that are not currently stressful may start to induce anxiety. While this is not always the case, cannabis can worsen your mental state if you are not careful. This effect became more pronounced when I smoked alone. Having other people around helped me stay present, whereas I tended to be in my head when alone. 3. Food consumption. Continued cannabis use led to unhealthy eating habits for me. The munchies are real, and more often than not you crave foods that are not healthy. If this becomes common, your overall diet can decline quickly. Story 10. One thing I rarely see mentioned is the effect of marijuana on dreaming. Marijuana use can suppress dreaming during normal sleep. When someone stops using marijuana for a while, they may experience night after night of extremely vivid dreams. I can only speak from my own experience, but a coworker's father reported the same. He started smoking again because he could not handle having acid trip dreams every night. I suspect that marijuana has a potent effect on rapid eye movement sleep that will remain underdocumented until it is descheduled and more thorough research can be done. Story 11. Weed is for people who have found their way in life. It is not for people who are looking for the way. My uncle. In other words, as fun as it may seem when you're young, get your life together first. Education, family, career, and so on. Editor's note. Thanks for the award, kind strangers. For those of you who have taken offense, relax. I am glad it worked out for you, and I offer my sympathies if it did not. Regardless, for most people, weed can take away motivation and drive if it is used heavily at an early age. I do not think it is a good idea to be using bongs every day from age 16 throughout high school. Story 12. It is really bad for developing brains, that is, anyone under 25. Story 13. I would say that as a long-term smoker who wants to quit, it has made me feel incredibly boring. If I have evening plans on the weekend but smoke during the day, I am far more likely to cancel those nighttime plans. If I do attend after smoking during the day, I am not fully present. I experience awkward silences, jokes do not land, and keeping a conversation going becomes much harder. I find myself just waiting for an appropriate time to leave. Overall, it makes me socially awkward and dull to be around in social settings. This is just my experience. Story 14. As a regular cannabis user, I do not like when people say that cannabis is not addictive. They are correct that it is not chemically addictive in the same way as nicotine, but you can still develop a psychological dependence on being intoxicated. Story 15. I smoked every day for about 10 years, except for about 6 months when I needed to be clean for a job drug test. In my opinion, marijuana starts off amazing and fun, but after becoming a habitual smoker it becomes a crutch that is hard to shake. It is not that it is highly addictive. Rather, nothing feels as fun as being high, so you want to be high all the time. It dulls emotions but brings up feelings of existentialism, which can sometimes be overwhelming. I often felt stuck in my life. It was hard to make changes, and although I wanted better things for myself, they always seemed impossible to achieve. I had breathing problems, but I have a history of asthma and took up Tai Chi to compensate. I found Tai Chi enjoyable and it helped me to slow down and greatly reduce my smoking. The most annoying thing about being a daily smoker is that tolerance increases, so even though you are smoking you do not get the high you used to get, just a mind-numbing effect and insomnia. I also lost my appetite over time and ate less. Smoking made me comfortable with where I was in life and caused a lack of motivation. Occasionally, once a month or two, it could motivate me to do something, but that motivation faded quickly. Overall, I would recommend using marijuana only at parties or once in a while. I quit a while ago and never want to return to daily smoking. Now that I am an expectant mother, my feelings have changed. I do not want my children growing up around marijuana or around me being high. I feel they should discover it on their own if they want to, and I should not influence them to think it is okay. Edit. I appreciate all the comments. Thank you for the awards. I meant to write crutch instead of crux. We'd highlighted thoughts and feelings of existentialism in my life, and I felt like a martyr on a quest to find answers. I felt like I was crucifying myself for a righteous cause to know what I wanted to know. Many people say I described addiction when I stated marijuana was not addictive. I always thought that if something was addictive, you could not quit cold turkey because your body would go into shock or worse, or that you could not quit without medical help like methadone. For heroin addicts, since I quit marijuana cold turkey when I wanted to, I did not think it was addictive. For example, I choose to eat eggs every day for breakfast. They are not addictive, but I like them and choose them. But maybe I am addicted. I am just stating. I also used psychedelics for a period of time during all this, which may have changed how marijuana affected me over time. I had a lot of bad trips and cannot even think about tripping again. God bless you all. I know marijuana affects people differently. I just wanted to share how it affected me over time. I do not think it should be illegal, and I believe people should be free to use it as they see fit. Everyone has the personal liberty to choose their own path. Edit 2. For anyone looking for advice on how to stop, I recommend changing your routine. My husband and I picked up different activities like taking the dogs to the dog park, going to hockey games, spending more time with family, going to the beach, and practicing Tai Chi. We are both homebodies, but we decided to go out and be more active, and it helped break the routine of sitting at home and smoking. Find new things to do instead. Story 16. Frequent heavy use can affect your motivation and mood, even when you are not high. It is not technically addictive, but for some people it can be habit-forming and lead to maladaptive patterns. Inhaling smoke from burned plant material is harmful to your lungs. Story 17. Inhaling any type of smoke at all isn't good for your lungs, and that is expensive. Story 18. It can trigger psychosis if you are already susceptible to it. Like anything else, it can be addictive. Putting anything that is not air in your lungs is bad for you. Story 19. This thread is giving me increasing motivation to quit in the new year. What I've noticed about excessive use and what is frequently discussed here is a loss of motivation. I become a slobbish baked potato for the most part. I let everything go until it becomes anxiety-inducing and causes a breakdown. Quitting cold turkey, at least in my experience, can cause sleep paralysis, which is terrifying. Story 20. One of the biggest downsides I have seen, as someone who does not smoke but has had many friends who do, is that it can become a crutch. Most of my friends cannot get through the day without using marijuana. They say they need it for stress or irritation, and over time it becomes an obsession. For many, including people I have dated, it is all they care about. They simply go to their best friend's house and use marijuana. I am not saying this applies to everyone, but it does affect many people. Story 21. Brain structure and function. A systematic review of 56 published neuroimaging studies of brain structure and function in adult cannabis users found consistent evidence of reduced hippocampal volume and lower hippocampal gray matter density in cannabis users compared with controls, and no evidence for changes in whole brain volume. Evidence for changes in other brain regions was inconsistent or inconclusive. Abnormalities of neuronal activity were observed even when cognitive task performance was normal, suggesting that cannabis users may need to engage different levels of neuronal activation to achieve normal performance. The hippocampus is primarily responsible for memory. Habitual marijuana use changes neuronal activity, requiring the brain to adapt to perform normal tasks. It is unclear whether these adaptations come at a cost, but brain function changes have been observed. Cannabis-induced psychosis. A national registry study identified 1,492 patients diagnosed with cannabis-induced psychosis in the Danish Psychiatric Central Research Register between 1994 and 2014 and followed them through August 2014. The study found a 41.2% conversion rate to schizophrenia, with a 95% confidence interval of 36.6 to 46.2%. 50% of men converted within 2.0 years and 50% of women within 4.4 years. There is a significant hazard of developing schizophrenia for those with an underlying family history of the disease, especially during adolescence. Mood disorders. Depression. A 2014 meta-analysis of 14 prospective longitudinal studies that controlled for depression at baseline found that heavy cannabis users had an odds ratio of 1.62, with a 95% confidence interval of 1.21 to 2.16, for developing clinically diagnosed major depression or depressive symptoms compared with light or non-users. Bipolar disorder. A meta-analysis of 2 studies of individuals with bipolar disorder found cannabis use associated with a 3-fold increased risk with an odds ratio of 2.97 and a 95% confidence interval of 1.80 to 4.90 for new onset of manic symptoms. An odds ratio does not by itself establish causation. Other reported associations include anxiety disorders, lung problems from inhaling smoke or vaping fluids, increased cancer risks, cyclic vomiting syndrome, decreased male fertility, and increased risk of tooth and gum disease. Marijuana is not as immediately lethal as some other substances, but that does not make it safe. Some risks may be reduced by changing the route of use. For example, using edibles to avoid inhaling smoke, but many complications appear to stem from cannabinoids in the body rather than only from the route of administration. This summary does not address potential therapeutic effects of cannabidiol and delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. It is important to remember that medicines have both risks and benefits. For example, aspirin can save a life during a heart attack but can also cause stomach bleeding. Parts of the cannabis plant may have medical value once active compounds are isolated and well studied, but being medicinal does not make a substance harmless. References: 1. Nader D.A. Sanchez ZM. Effects of regular cannabis use on neurocognition, brain structure, and function. A systematic review of findings in adults. The American Journal of Drug and Alcohol Abuse, 2017, 44:418. 2. Starzer MSK, Nordentoft M., Jorthage C. Rates and predictors of conversion to schizophrenia or bipolar disorder following substance-induced psychosis. American Journal of Psychiatry, 2018, 175:343-350. 3. Levran S. et al. The Association Between Cannabis Use and Depression. A Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis of Longitudinal Studies. Psychological Medicine, 2013, 44:797-810. 4. Gibbs M. et al. Cannabis Use and Mania Symptoms. A Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. European Psychiatry, 2015, 30:1128. Story 22. Many people smoke instead of dealing with their problems. On the subreddit trees, I often see posts saying a girlfriend left and the poster is getting extremely high. I treat cannabis the way I treat alcohol. Only on weekends and occasionally on weekdays. I use it to have fun, not to escape my life. Story 23. Marijuana needs to be studied more. Until recently, there have been few scientific studies on its effects because of legal restrictions in the United States. There is moderate evidence that acute marijuana use can impair learning, memory, and attention. For that reason, it is reasonable to advise people under about 25 not to use it, because the brain is still developing during that period. Story 24. Cannabis-induced dissociation can completely ruin your life. Story 25. If you smoke it very often, your short-term memory becomes severely impaired. There was a period in my life when I smoked for 2 months straight, almost a gram a day. My memory was non-existent then. I work in consulting and realized it was affecting my job, so I had to quit. Cannabis can be enjoyable, but do not overdo it. Story 26. The majority of people I know who smoke cannabis regularly make it an integral part of their personality. It wears thin at times and the smell is strong. Smoke cannabis if you want, but make it just another thing you do, not the only thing you do. Story 27. Depersonalization and derealization can occur after a high and may last for months. If you do not know what depersonalization and derealization are, they are severe forms of anxiety that can affect people after using cannabis and may take a long time to resolve. Story 28. Mind-blowing anxiety and paranoia every time. It is not for me. To be clear, I fully support anyone's right to do what they feel helps their own body, and I am not against marijuana. If it helps you, I am happy for you. I wish it were the same for me. Happy New Year. Story 29. It can completely lower your blood pressure or cause an irregular heartbeat if you overdo it, usually with edibles. I am a paramedic, and the only cannabis-related calls I receive are due to edibles. They can seriously harm you. Story 30. For me, I smoked it every day for 2 years. I don't remember much from that time, even though it should have been the most memorable period of my life. Story 31. Laziness. Many people say it makes you more motivated, but based on the people I know who use cannabis, it is not the case. Story 32. I started smoking marijuana in high school. I would go to school, then hang out with friends and get high. Not every day, but sometimes. I had chess club once a week, and I was a better player if I had not smoked marijuana the previous day. It was obvious at the time because the only changing variable between the end of school and bedtime was whether I had smoked. It limited my capacity to think critically. I am not sure if that was just because I was young. Story 33. This is personal, but it does not help me stay off hard drugs. I am a recovering intravenous cocaine and heroin addict. In the past, I tried to only smoke cannabis and avoid the hard drugs, but I always end up smoking compulsively, or I smoke once, get too anxious, and tell myself the seal is broken and go get what I really want. Either way, it has always led me back to the drugs that have been destroying my life for the last 5 years. Since I started using harder drugs, cannabis no longer affects me the way it did when I was younger. I sometimes feel nauseous from the smell, and when I do smoke, it often feels like having a bad trip. Story 34. The media portrays its effects as more extreme than they are, which can lead people to have unrealistic expectations the first time they try it and to overuse it until they have a very bad trip. Story 35. All right. Many heavy users report that when they stop using cannabis, they have difficulty eating and cannot sleep. Those low-level issues are part of cannabis dependence, including moodiness and other symptoms. Some people claim that after a day of very heavy use, you are not in a fog the next day. I disagree. That may be subjective. I am strongly pro-cannabis, but I dislike when people say it is no big deal while acting as if it is. I am not in favor of drug testing employees. Yet how many people do you know who are stuck in jobs below their qualifications because they refuse positions where they cannot use cannabis, while others insist it is nothing? I want cannabis legalized and medical cannabis fully embraced. I think anyone aged 21 and older should be able to use it without it hindering employment or being a crime. Like every other substance, regardless of legality, cannabis can have negative side effects, and denying that is incorrect. Those effects vary between individuals. Legalize it, but do not pretend it is not a psychoactive substance with measurable side effects. Story 36. Psychological dependence occurs when a person cannot sleep, eat, or relax without it. Chronic use tends to make a person passive, both mentally and physically. Paranoia, anxiety, panic attacks, and the triggering of underlying mental illnesses are possible downsides. These symptoms are rare and vary between individuals. Story 37. It can worsen depression and anxiety symptoms long-term, even when you are not high. It can also cause brain fog, make it harder to process information, and slow cognitive functioning. Story 38. Besides the obvious, it makes you feel content with the bullshit around you. Instead of changing it, you start numbing it out. After a while, that does not work for anyone. Story 39. 3 days into quitting, I really needed this right now. Thank you, everyone. Story 40. There is an idea that driving while high on marijuana is somehow safe. It really is not. It makes you drowsy, impairs your reaction time, and makes you spacey, which are all factors that can cause you to crash your car and kill someone. The attitude of people who say they are fine to drive while high is just as dangerous and irresponsible as the attitude of people who say they drive better when intoxicated. Story 41. I am an alcoholic, so I am not criticizing people who smoke too much, but heavy marijuana users can be the most annoying. People who only talk about marijuana, smoke all day every day, and think it cures everything are tiresome. Alcohol is worse in some ways, but you will rarely meet someone who believes a shot of whiskey will cure the flu. Putting annoyance aside, burning anything and inhaling the smoke is certainly not good for your lungs. Also, young people use it too much. I did too, but any drugs can harm developing minds. If you are an adult and do not become obsessively focused on it, then use marijuana to your heart's content. Story 42. I am working toward a field where there is a good chance of being poached. Cold called by prospective employers seeking to hire me away from my current employer for a significant pay increase and better benefits. The conversation could go like this. We have a position for you to start tomorrow 3 miles from your house at $122,000 per year with full medical coverage including dependents, a pension, A 32-hour work week alternating between Fridays and Mondays off, so every other weekend is a 4-day weekend, a guaranteed yearly bonus, and a $10,000 cash signing bonus. We just need you to provide a urine sample first. Story 43. The moment you exhale, someone from work will call and need help resolving a multi-screen problem that requires you to visualize what they are clicking incorrectly. Story 44. Breathing air is better for lung health than inhaling anything else. Story 45. Smoking when you are young can cause long-term depression later in life. Story 46. Here are a few downsides based on personal experience. Smoke in the lungs is harmful, especially if you also smoke cigarettes. Cannabis can become expensive if you develop dependence. It can be habit-forming like many enjoyable activities. You may have to deal with social stigma and biased opinions from friends, family, and coworkers. If you are prone to low motivation, indica strains may magnify that tendency. You must plan around drug tests and abstain as needed. If you avoid workplaces that test for drugs because of dependence, you may be limited to lower-paying jobs in some areas. The smell can cling to clothing, furniture, and other surfaces if you do not take precautions. If cannabis is illegal where you live and your supplier does not deliver, there is a risk of arrest, police raids, or being stopped and found in possession. Living in public housing or a college dorm can lead to eviction, disciplinary action, or legal consequences if cannabis use or possession is discovered. Criminal drug charges can severely damage career prospects in certain fields. If your supplier disappears, finding a new one can expose you to risks such as robbery or being overcharged. Buying from the black market carries risks of contamination, including mold or pesticide residues. Poor cleaning of pipes, bongs, or other devices can lead to bacterial or mold growth and increase infection risk. Resin and ash can spread to countertops, tables, clothing, and other surfaces if you are not careful. If you struggle with addiction, depression, or other mental health conditions, a supplier who offers multiple substances can increase risk. Some people may spend time with you only to obtain cannabis. When you have none, they may stop visiting. Heavy cannabis use before brain development is complete. Brain maturation can continue into the mid-20s, may worsen motivational issues and impair cognitive development. Increased appetite can lead to weight gain if you have difficulty controlling your diet. Frequent late-night snacking can contribute to gastroesophageal reflux disease, also known as GERD. Taking very large inhalations and repeatedly coughing can contribute to costochondritis, inflammation of the chest wall. Dependence can make travel and vacations stressful. If cannabis becomes central to your identity, you may shape your personality around it, which can harm relationships and your social life. Combining alcohol and cannabis, especially for infrequent users, can cause severe dizziness, nausea, vomiting, and other unpleasant effects. Pets can accidentally ingest edibles and become very ill. Accidental ingestion often requires veterinary care. Tips on controlling the smell. Do not smoke in clothing you would wear outside the house. Limit use to one room with good ventilation, preferably a bathroom or another well-ventilated area. Smoking after a hot shower with the exhaust fan on can reduce odor because some smell compounds bind to steam and are removed by ventilation. Wash your hands with a degreasing soap after handling cannabis or smoking devices to avoid transferring odor to clothing, surfaces, or skin. When transporting cannabis, before touching any product, place a clean and used plastic bag over a glass or mug to keep it open. Put the cannabis inside without letting it touch the outside of the bag. Wash your hands after handling the product or use disposable gloves and discard them before sealing the bag. Seal the bag inside an opaque container such as a coffee can or other container to discourage casual snooping. This is not guaranteed to stop odors from trained detection animals. Hope this helps. Story 47. I am speaking from 10 years of experience. First, cannabis is great. I enjoy it. Here are some things I can pinpoint. 1. Tolerance. After you smoke the same strain for a few days, it becomes less potent for you. 2. Bad dealers. Some will give you less for your money's worth. 3. Waiting, the wait to get it sorted. 4. Risk, legal and personal risk depending on location. 5. Price varies by location and dealer. 6. Social stigma from family or coworkers. 7. Smell. A lot of cannabis has a strong aroma that others will notice unless it is vacuum sealed. If smoked indoors, the smell sticks to everything. 8. Wake and bake. This can go either way. You can have the best day ever or be hazy, tired, and unmotivated. 9. Motivation. Personally, it can drain my motivation, though that could also be from a 40-hour workweek in college. 10. Morning after. If you smoke all night and need to wake up early, it is rough getting up in the morning. It is nowhere near as bad as a hangover. I call it a dankover. 11. Paranoia. I do not get this often, but I am usually in a safe environment. 12. Depression. If you are prone to depression, cannabis can either deepen the spiral or temporarily help pull you out. 13. Emotional blunting. For me, it dulled a lot of emotion and thought. When I took tolerance breaks, those thoughts would rush back strongly and affect me. I usually smoke daily, so that is part of the issue. There are positives and negatives to all drugs. Cannabis has many pros, but be aware of the downsides and use responsibly. Story 48. It is most definitely habit-forming. No, it is not chemically addictive, and it completely depends on each individual, but it is possible to develop an addiction. I fully support legalization and an individual's right to use it, but speaking from experience, it can be a major killer of motivation and can leave you a husk of yourself if you let it. Story 49. A few downsides I noticed after a couple of years of daily use. People say it will make them more productive, but for the most part it makes them content with boredom. Relying on it for eating or sleeping can cause loss of appetite and mild insomnia for a few days after quitting long-term use. After taking a break and trying it again, I experienced a slight hangover the next day, feeling slower and duller. It can cause depersonalization and derealization, where things do not feel real and you become overly introspective. This stems from anxiety. Marijuana introduced me to severe anxiety, which contributed to why I quit. Lastly, friends who use it constantly are less interesting to interact with. I realized I was probably like that and am glad I stopped. I do not judge people for using it, but I do not deny the negative effects of daily habitual use. It has its place both medicinally and recreationally, but it is not a miracle drug without downsides. Often the people who promote it that way are defending their habit, which I used to do. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.